Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 14 and compare it against the iPhone 13 Pro Max and see which specific phone is a better one for you. Now, the 13 Pro Max, I think, is probably the better phone in every single area, but this 13 Pro Max, for some reason, keeps randomly restarting on me. I'm not really too sure why, probably because they cracked back. But the iPhone 14, I think, is probably the newer option for some people, but there's really no competition. I think the 13 Pro Max is probably the better phone for every single person watching this video. If you want to pick it up, links will be down in the description. You can get it from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off side by side, the iPhone 13 Pro Max on the front has a massive 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display, and it's a very good panel. I've said pretty much since day one that this was probably one of the better displays Apple has ever made, and I still 100% back that up. I think this is a beautiful screen, has a lot of capability, 120 Hz ProMotion, a little bit of a notch up top, but I'm not complaining too much. And I do think it's a pretty good display overall. There's not too much to complain about. Like I said, this one keeps randomly restarting on me. I'm not really too sure why. It's never really done that before, but I guess there's not much we can do about it, and it's probably going to restart in 2 seconds. The iPhone 14, on the other hand, has a little bit of a smaller 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. Now, a few things to keep in mind with this display. One, it is a smaller display than the 13 Pro Max. You're still getting that notch and everything, so there's the same thing there. I think it's a little bit low resolution, but also there's no 120 Hz. It's only 60 Hz, which is still good enough for a lot of people, but that is probably one thing to keep in mind with this device over something like the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Now, in terms of thinness and thickness between the two, you can clearly see that the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the 14 aren't really that too far off in terms of thinness and thickness. Now, clearly the iPhone 13 Pro Max is the bigger phone, but it is still kind of interesting that there is that much of a similarity, I would say, between the two. You have the buttons pretty much in the same spot. The 14s no longer have a SIM card tray. The 13 Pro Max still has it. On the bottom, lightning ports between the two, which is always really nice to have. It's looking like we're going to get USB-C very, very soon. And on the back, I have a completely bashed back on the back of my 13 Pro Max. I'll have to put a skin on it or something because it looks disgusting. With the iPhone 14, we do have the standard dual camera setup, triple camera setup here. We're getting glass backs, but this frosted glass back on the iPhone 13 Pro Max is a little bit better. Like I said, I mean, it is completely butchered because it is basically a cracked back. We have wireless charging on both. We have MagSafe capability on both as well, so those MagSafe accessories will work. And definitely when it comes down to both of them, I like them. I think they're very solid-looking phones, but I definitely would say a phone like the 13 Pro Max is probably the better one in pretty much most areas, and that's something that I've always liked about the 13 Pro Max. And you can see my 13 Pro Max is already restarted. Now, in terms of software and longevity, this is going to be a pretty big difference between the two. Actually, probably not really. The iPhone 13 Pro Max and the iPhone 14 are realistically probably going to be lasting around the same time. So that's probably a good thing to keep in mind. They both have the same exact chipsets internally. So that's probably one thing to keep in mind. So when it comes down to that specific portion of everything, you're probably going to be getting a similar lifespan between the two. Mostly, like I said before, because they both have pretty much the same exact chipset inside. So there's really not going to be that big of a difference there. Now let's go and do a speed comparison between the two phones. The iPhone 13 Pro Max has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 6 GB of RAM, and the iPhone 14 also has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 6 GB of RAM as well. So let's go and see which one's the faster one between both. Okay, there we go. All the apps are cleared out in the background except for these ones, so let's get into it. 13 Pro Max is here, 14 is here. Phone calls 3, 2, 1. Now I'm really trying to go through and making sure that both of these phones randomly don't restart like my 13 Pro Max has been restarting. I think when it comes down to the speed, they're probably going to be more similar than not. Mail 3, 2, 1. About the same thing. App Store 3, 2, 1. And I'm expecting the performance to be relatively exactly the same between the two. And that's mostly due because, like I said, because the chipsets and everything internally. Camera 3, 2, 1. Okay. Guess we'll have to set this up later. Hopping out of here. It's going into clock 3, 2, 1. Perfect. It's going into settings 3, 2, 1. Okay. Let's go up out of here. Let's do some of these third-party applications we have on both of them. Temple Run 2, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm thinking there's going to be random glitches and pop-ups that happen, so I'm just going to try my best to kind of hop out of them. You can see right here, there's not much we could have done here. So both of these apps, I mean, like why does there need to be those many pop-ups on this type of phone? Like it makes no sense at all. Hopping out of this one, let's try Stack 3, 2, 1. Wow, another pop-up there. Of course, we can't just, open up an application. We have to make sure we have, 30 pop-ups that come up. Subway Surfers, 3, 2, 1. Now, any second now, this phone is probably going to restart. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that happens. It's going to hop out of here. Let's go and try Snapchat, 3, 2, 1. Two different kind of pop-ups. Instagram, let's go and skip that one. Let's do Snake vs. Blocks, 3, 2, 1. Let's go get into the game. So that would have been perfect if I just clicked it a little bit faster. Gameplay-wise, probably roughly around the same. Genshin Impact is still loading on here. Let's try Netflix, 3, 2, 1. Of course, it's going to be another pop-up. And so far, I really don't think there was too many differences between the two. I think there's a lot of similarity and a lot of overlap between these two devices, which personally I think is really good. When you're getting both of these phones, they're relatively going to be around the same ballpark, and of course it shuts off now. So I think that's a good thing. I think a phone like the iPhone 13 Pro Max is probably still a little bit of a faster phone though, in my opinion, mostly because I still think actually a phone like the iPhone 14 may actually be the faster one because of the slightly smaller display, less pixels to push and everything like that. But I still think you're getting a really fast phone. Like they're almost exactly the same type of performance there. So that kind of covers it up there. Now in terms of the camera quality, like I mentioned, you're getting very similar. You're getting different cameras, but kind of similar performance a little bit. So you're getting a triple camera setup on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, a wide ultra-wide telephoto lens. The iPhone 14, you're getting a wide and ultra-wide camera. So you're able to zoom in a lot more on the iPhone 13 Pro Max camera, which is beautiful. The iPhone 14, on the other hand, you can only do 5x zoom, which is more or less, it's kind of a sad thing to be honest. But you're getting 4K at 60 on the back of both of them, which I think is pretty important. Now, on the iPhone 13 Pro Max on this type of phone, you are getting zooming in 15x zoom, which is crazy. You're getting 0.5x zoom all the way outside, which is really good. You're still maintaining things like video mode, cinematic mode, slow mode, time lapse, portrait mode as well. And I definitely do think a phone like the iPhone 13 Pro Max camera is actually very, very good. I've always liked this camera. I thought it was very solid when it first came out, and I still think now it's actually very, very good. Easily by far one of the best cameras you can buy, and that's really saying something considering that the 13 Pro Max is a 2021 phone. I do think the 13 Pro Max is a better camera overall than the iPhone 14 as well, so that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. Now, with the 13 Pro, well, the 14 actually, I think this camera is very good, like I mentioned. You're getting 5x zoom, you're getting 0.5x zoom. It's not a whole lot of zoom though. It's a pretty standard camera. There's not really anything insane going on with it. You're getting photo mode, video mode, cinematic mode, slow mode, time lapse, portrait mode, panorama mode. I think this is a pretty solid camera too. I think the 13 Pro Max camera is probably the better one, but I've always felt like a phone like the iPhone 14 is a very good camera, and this is something that I really, really do like about this type of lens. So, in terms of the camera quality, I'd probably say the 13 Pro Max is a better phone, and I'd probably say the iPhone 13 Pro Max is a better phone than the iPhone 14. When I look at the iPhone 14, I see a phone that still looks good, still has quite a bit of capability, but it's not perfect. The iPhone 14 is a smaller phone. Some people prefer that. I feel like you're getting better battery life from a phone like the iPhone 13 Pro Max. I also feel like the camera quality on the 13 Pro Max is better. Just the capability behind the 13 Pro Max is better. And you're also getting a ProMotion display on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which is really nice. Not a lot of phones, or at least not a lot of iPhones have that. 4 iPhones right now have ProMotion out of all of them ever made, and the 13 Pro Max is one of them. So personally, I think that's one big thing to keep in mind. And I really like the 13 Pro Max more so than I like the iPhone 14. So that is kind of how I look at both these phones, to be honest. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. The like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.